I'm trying not to talk much, but I think I need to preface this. And that is, my hope is that we will adopt this budget. In the same breath, I want to make it very clear that the efforts that will begin with our September meeting on that Thursday morning does not preclude us from adjusting that budget in the future on any of the line items that this commission believes is appropriate. Just as we do expansions that come to us pretty regularly, we have the option of doing adjustments, and we'll work with Director Carter and staff if anything comes out of that. So I don't want you to believe that, is this the budget we're going to be adopting? Yes. But this budget is reviewed by both staff and us throughout the year. And with that, I have good peace of mind of going forward with this budget today. From the committee standpoint, do I have a motion to adopt the 2016-2017 budget?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion, committee or commission? Is there any discussion from the public? Hearing none. Excuse me, Director Carter. Yes, sir.
Just for the record, I'll repeat the two totals. For in the 16-17, $70,819,700 in wildlife, $11,095,900 in boating, for a total agency budget of $81,915,600.
Director Carter, thank you. That's most appropriate. With no other discussion, speaking to the Budget Committee, all in favor of this adopting the budget, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? The ayes carry. We're now bringing this before the full commission. Do I have a motion to adopt the proposed 2016-2017 budget in the amounts Director Carter shared?
So moved.
Second? I got a lot of moves, and I'm going to assume one of those is second. Any further discussion? Any discussion from the public? Director Carter, any other comments before we vote?
Just in the way of thanks, again, I really appreciate the time that the Budget Committee in general and your leadership in that part. And also I wanted to say thanks to the staff. They've spent an inordinate amount of time doing background work to come up with these, and the amount of time that we had, as you probably know, we go through line by line of every single 450 budgets in the agency to come up with the totals we just gave you. Staff, and especially Barry and Ken, put in a ton of work on this. I just wanted to acknowledge that, so thank you.
You all really have, and thank you is not enough, but that's a starting point, so we really do thank the staff. If there's no other discussion, we'll be voting. Yes, I'm sorry.
I would like, Barry and Ken, you guys did a good job. I would like to ask you next year when you're putting those budgets together and you're breaking those line items out, if you could be a little more specific on the equipment. So when we're, as a commissioner, are looking at what you're wanting to spend, I was one that brought up the different mowers and tractors, and if you could just put a description of what each regional manager wants in his budget, if we could have a little better detail on that, it would help us as commissioners to understand where we're going and what we're doing with each piece of equipment, please. Thank you.
I'm really glad we've got a contractor on this commission, because he knows what to look for, and that's and I really have appreciated your input, Commissioner Baker, truly have. Any other discussion? Any other comments? If not, we're voting on the proposed 2016-2017 budget as a commission. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Ayes carry. Mr. Chairman, it's yours.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Harold, and I just commend all the work that you've done, and Commissioner Watson and all the budget committee and Barry. I really appreciate what everybody's done. I know it's something that an old chicken farmer from up on the plateau just doesn't get a grasp of. So I'm glad we've got you to do it. So, moving on to the Wildlife Committee and Chairman Jeff McMillan. Before we get started, we've got a new app, and when Chuck Yost gets up to do his presentation, it will be a live broadcast. So, Commissioner McMillan?
Are you saying I need to watch what I say, or?
Chuck does. Chuck does.
All right, thank you, Chairman Bledsoe. This time I'll ask Chuck to come up and discuss our elk hunt winners.
So good morning, Commissioners. I wanted to say real quick, it's great to be back in Region 4. 12 years ago, my career started here. I started out as a wildlife officer in Washington County. And I wanted to share just for a second an experience in my first day at work with the Wildlife Agency. And I don't know if Brian Ripley will remember this or not, but so I show up as a brand new wildlife officer, and I'll tell you, it's really intimidating. It's really intimidating because I walked into a room with guys like Brian, and you know, the uniforms looked great, and I didn't have mine yet, and that there was lots of people in the room that I really looked up to. So I was super intimidated, but it was an area meeting, and it was my first day at work, so I sit down, and I'm feeling great that I've made it there on time, and I finally sit down, and I was getting my act together, and Brian opened up and said, "Chuck, it's great to see you, and we're glad you're here, but you're in the wrong room." It turns out I was supposed to be working for Tim Sane, which I realized in that moment. So anyway, I went a couple doors down to the correct office and to the correct work unit. So thankfully, things turned around in my career, and I think that I have the staff that was in Region 4 at the time to thank for that. So it was a good start. And I should also say that based on the announcement that was made previously, that I would like to welcome the viewers from Periscope to the elk drawing results. And with that, I would like to share with you that, as you can see from the slide, that our elk hunt has been super successful. Started back in 2009. And as you will see, that the average harvest during the duration of these hunts has been better than 4, so about 4.5. Now for this next year, the season will run from the 19th through the 25th, and as you're aware, the final 2 days are only open to a youth hunter. And you're also aware that since the beginning of this hunt in our state, we've also had a permit that is auctioned off by a nonprofit conservation organization raising money for Tennessee's Elk Project. And this year, again, the Tennessee Wildlife Resources Foundation had that tag and auctioned it, and the highest bidder and the person who will hunt with this permit is Nicholas Nelson from North Carolina. And you'll see there that the winning bid was $11,101. So that's a pretty impressive amount. So we had great success with that. And now on a few details about the drawing this year. The number of applicants that we had decreased a little bit. You'll notice that we had greater than 9,000 people apply. And I would still classify this as highly successful, although there was a decrease. And there's a few hypotheses out there for why there was a decrease. It could be the fact that there has been a change in the license fees, but maybe more credible is the fact that around the time that this process occurred, we were going through a change in our agency website just to get us updated and consistent with the other state agencies in the state. And we believe the combination of those two things may have led to this slight decrease, but nothing to be alarmed about. So the drawing winners for this year's hunt, and if you'll remember, there are 4 of the regular tags and then 1 youth tag. And the first winner is Trevor Childs from Knoxville. The second lucky hunter will be Roy Bivens from Tellico Plains. Third is Andrew Coffey from Crossville. And the final tag of this group is Forrest Landers of Afton. So then that leaves the one youth tag. And if I recall, we had about 500 applications in the youth category. And this is the one I get the most excited about because I can't imagine having this opportunity. So the youth winner for this year is Jacob Parker from Sparta, Tennessee. And I'm really curious, commissioners, do any of you know any of these individuals?
Is Andrew Coffey kin to Clarence Coffey?
I'll have to ask him. I'm not sure.
That's a good change. That might be Clarence Coffey's son.
Is that right? Could be. Could be. That would be neat if it was. But I sort of suspected that one of you might at least know one of them. So anyway, that is a result for this next year. And I know I'm terribly excited for these individuals, and I know they'll have, based on the history, they're going to have a great hunt and obviously a great experience. So in closing, I'd like to say that to the viewers of Periscope, we appreciate you joining in. And thank you, commissioners.
Thank you, Chuck. That's pretty impressive. The way y'all handled it today, and I'm sure there's going to be some people that will get a phone call this afternoon that'll be very excited, and I know I would be. And I guess in about 2 years I can start putting my name in, correct? I'm sure y'all'd pull it if I won. But all right, well, thank you so much. This time I'll ask our statewide water coordinator, Joe Benedict, to come up and talk about our migratory bird seasons.
Good morning, Commissioners. Thanks for the chance to be here. I am here to talk today about the 2015-16 migratory game bird hunting seasons. Before we get started, I want to provide a few items of informational background for you and the public as well. These items will include the early migratory bird season dates. Those are seasons that are set in a different proclamation that we don't open every year, and include all the seasons that begin in September. Wanted to mention briefly dove fields. That season is starting as well, September 1st. I wanted to talk a little bit about the locations that we have and how to access that information. Talk about the harvest last year, waterfowl and Sandhill crane harvest, and let you know how successful Tennessee hunters were. And then finally mention the Sandhill crane drawing date. After that, those informational updates, we will get into the proclamations before you today, which are Proclamation 1520 in regards to the late waterfowl season hunting dates, and then also an associated proclamation, 1521, which is the manner and means proclamation. And we're addressing this. I've worked with law enforcement extensively, and since I was up here, I offered to go ahead and make this presentation. And that proclamation, those changes that we're going to request, have to do with the light goose or the snow goose conservation season. Some additional provisions that we're allowed to take, and a new permit that is going to be required for those provisions. And then finally, just a mention at the end of the season setting process for next year due to a change in the federal process. So we'll get right into these early season dates. Just as a note, I've taken these dates directly from the current hunting guide on page 20. The species in white, or the seasons in white here, are seasons that don't have date changes. So they're pretty much static dates. The two items I wanted to bring your attention to are the wood duck teal season in September. That begins the second Saturday in September, September 12th this year, and it runs for 5 days, ending on September 16th, which is a Wednesday. The daily bag is 6 wood ducks, 6 birds, only 2 of which can be wood ducks. And then you'll recall that last year you passed a teal-only experimental season, which is the 4 days immediately following the wood duck teal season, and those dates this year are September 17th through the 20th with a 6-bird bag limit. So moving to doves, dove season begins here on September 1st, just a few days. Again, this information is taken from page 20 of the hunting guide. We have a 28-day segment in September, beginning on September 1st at noon. 23 days, mostly in late October, and then the third segment of 39 days late November through early January. So I wanted to share with you, again, because dove season opens up soon and we've got a lot of interest in dove hunting here in Tennessee, I wanted to provide some information about the opportunities that Tennessee Wildlife provides to the public. This is a slide with last year's data. I appreciate our staff. I had tried to provide real-time information on the number of fields that we have, and because of the timing of how they sign these fields up, the leased fields in particular, I wasn't able to get you an accurate number, so I decided to use last year's numbers. And just want to show you that we've got between 15 and 25 fields, public dove hunting opportunities in each region. Some of these are leased property where we lease land from farmers, and those are the fields that are signed up, they're being signed up right now, and all the way right through, really right before the season. And then we have a number of wildlife management areas that have fields planted specifically for doves. And so I thought I'd just take a minute.
Question on that.
Sure.
We're leasing 29 fields. In our budget, we've got about $100,000 set up. Is that $100,000 we've got set up in our budget just for the 29 lease fields, or is that money spent on our WMAs also?
The $100,000 in the budget is for leased fields only. It does not include the wildlife management area fields. And just a note, last year I think we spent just under $67,000. So we haven't spent all that money. Right. I think there are years we have, and that money, of course, is just rolled into next year's budget. Sure. So again, I mentioned that these fields are being signed up right now. And this time of year, we get a lot of calls from hunters who want to know, hey, where are the dove fields this year? In particular, these leased fields that are private fields that our wildlife officers and our field staff locate. They locate fields with birds in different kinds of harvested crop fields. So because of that, this information is kind of last minute. This information is being updated on our website nearly on a daily basis from now until September 1st. So if you go to the agency website, there's a little search button in the top right, and I love search buttons on websites if I know exactly what I'm looking for. So if you go to our website, tn.gov/TWRA, type in dove, doves, or dove hunting, the first link that you get will take you to this page here that I've taken a screenshot of. And if you look down, I'm going to use my cursor here. If you look down to the second link here, it says TWRA managed or leased dove fields. If you click on that, it'll pull this map up that's here, and you can click on your region, which will bring up a list of fields. And those will also be expanded. And so you'll have a location, it'll have the crop type, it'll get some further information about that specific field. So again, if folks are interested in dove hunting, check this website frequently between now and September 1st. This is constantly being updated, and we really do want folks to find these fields and use the resource that we have. A couple of meetings ago, I mentioned that the federal duck stamp price increased this year. It went into effect July 1st. I just want to bring that to your attention again. For folks that may not have bought their federal waterfowl stamp yet, the price is now $25. And again, all this money goes into wetland conservation for the ducks and other wetland-dependent wildlife species. So now we'll jump into the harvest, last year's waterfowl harvest. Tennessee hunters had a fairly average year last year, which actually is a pretty good year. We harvested over 220,000 ducks, again, which is about average and about identical to the previous year. The average duck hunter, which we know there really isn't an average duck hunter, but on average, Tennessee duck hunters took 9 trips last year and harvested 2 ducks per day for an average of 17 ducks per season. So that number, 17 ducks per season, again puts Tennessee in the top 4 Mississippi flyway states based on duck harvest. So that's a good place to be. We're right up there with Arkansas and Louisiana. So we can be proud of our waterfowl harvest among the Mississippi flyway states. So the average Tennessee goose hunter took 6 trips last year and harvested 3 geese for an average of a half a goose a day. I've never seen a half a goose flying around, but I think when you put the average together, you come out with that. I wanted to provide for you the breakout of the species there, so you can see we harvest a lot of Canada geese in the state. And just a side note, that's my son's first lab there, and that's her first speckled-bellied goose taken this year in Jackson, outside of Jackson. So the September wood duck and teal season last year, we had a pretty good harvest, 5,500 wood ducks and 3,700 blue-winged teal. during the 5-day teal season. We don't yet have an estimate for the teal-only days. Should this season become operational, we'll start getting those estimates for that season. So hopefully in a few years, we'll begin to get those estimates. Sandhill cranes, 393 sandhill cranes were reported harvested by our hunters. Again, I just want to remind folks there's 1,200 permits that we issue, so 393 birds were harvested. 78% of hunters surveyed participated, and that's pretty high participation rates. They spent over almost 3,000 hours in the field pursuing cranes and went on 757 hunts. So that's a lot of resources, a lot of time that Tennessee hunters are spending out in the field pursuing cranes. Our midwinter survey that we conduct for waterfowl, we also count cranes. This is in early January, the first week of January each year. 2014, we counted about 26,000 cranes. Last year, we counted 42,335 cranes. So that number, the number of birds that are wintering in Tennessee is bumping up. So cranes are obviously managed by the Fish and Wildlife Service. They're a migratory bird. And so instead of doing a spring breeding population survey, we count these birds in the fall. And it's a population index that we have. We're not counting all the birds. We're not trying to count all the birds. We just want to get an index where we count in the same locations over time, and it gives us an index of where the population is. The fall 2014 survey was 83,473 cranes, which is a 30% increase from the previous year. So again, just an indication that this population of birds is continuing to grow and increase. And it's a 350% increase since the survey was begun in 1979. And you can see that in this graph. I've pulled this graph out of the Eastern Population Sandhill Crane report that we get every year after October. And just want to mention that, you know, this trend of increasing is continuing here. This population is growing both on an annual index, and if you look at the 3-year average, which is that dark line, those numbers are continuing to increase. So we don't have to worry about the population. They're doing quite well. The Sandhill Crane drawing has been set for October 3rd. That's a Saturday. I want to thank the folks in Region 3 for getting that set up, as well as the Birchwood Community Center. They've been a great host for us. It's a great facility to handle all the folks that come. We issued 400 permits that day at a handheld drawing, and just a note that last year we did issue all 400 permits that day, so there were no leftover permits. And I anticipate the same thing this year. So jumping to this year, the 2015 Waterfowl Breeding Population Survey, it's conducted each spring, led by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. The number here of total breeding duck population, the estimated breeding population, is 49.5 million birds, and that's a record high. You might recall last year that we also had a record high. It was 49.2 million, I guess. So, you know, that's a 6% increase from last year, and again, a record number of birds breeding up in the prairies. So that brings us to Proclamation 15-20, which you have before you. So based on the duck breeding population, the federal frameworks call for a liberal season. So our recommendation for all late waterfowl seasons are similar to last year, with the appropriate date changes to adjust for the calendar, and only one change to the daily bag limit, which is an increase. So this proclamation includes season dates and bag and possession limits for ducks, geese, youth waterfowl hunting days, sandhill cranes, rails, and gallinules. So just wanted to provide the daily bag limit for the species limits. And you'll notice in black that canvasbacks has gone from 1 per day to 2. That's the only change that's been recommended. So we recommend adoption of those bag limits. We wanted to remind you, show you a picture, especially for the new commissioners, that we have 2 waterfowl hunting zones. In Tennessee, we have the Reelfoot Zone in northwest Tennessee, which is in red there, and then the remainder of the state in blue. So the duck goose and, the duck coot and merganser season, the top row there, the recommendation is that we have a season similar to last year. We have the opening weekend this year we recommend is the weekend after Thanksgiving, so November 28th and 29th. And then we go as late as we can, which is the last Sunday in January, and we back it up the appropriate number of days, so it would have us opening December 5th. So just going through this table, if we stay in the middle column there for the statewide duck zone, gallinules and moorhens, and then the Virginian solar rails, all of those season dates mimic the duck season. And at the very bottom, youth waterfowl hunting days, those are the 2 Saturdays following the end of the statewide duck season. So this year they would be February 6th and the 13th. So now if we jump over to Reelfoot, the Reelfoot opening weekend is recommended to be November 14th and 15th. And that's a couple weeks earlier than the regular statewide season. And then all those other dates, the ending dates, December 5th through January 31st, and then all the way down the table are the exact same as the statewide dates. So moving into geese now. Blue geese, snow geese, and Ross's geese, which are collectively called light geese or referred to as light geese. The standard season, again adjusted for calendar dates, essentially mimics the duck season, but it does go later. It goes to February 13th, which is the last youth day. White-fronted geese is the exact same season as that snow goose season. And then brant season, it's kind of odd. We talk about brant, we have it in the regulations, and I'm up here spending some time on it. We haven't shot a brant in the Mississippi Flyway in probably a decade. So it's there. They look like Canada geese to people that aren't trained, and there may be some that wander. They're typically a coastal bird, but we do have a season. And you'll see those dates are slightly different than the other goose seasons. So some of the changes that we're recommending this year are highlighted in this conservation season for snow goose. And so the snow geese have been increasing in number in West Tennessee for a number of years, and our staff and myself, we're getting calls from folks that like to chase these geese. They had some questions. Last year, our bag limit was 20 per day during the standard season and the conservation season. These conservation seasons, or this conservation season, is not a typical hunting season. It's obviously called the conservation season. This season was started over a decade ago by the Fish and Wildlife Service to catch these snow geese, or these light geese, on their return migration back north. And a lot of you probably understand and know that these geese are tundra nesting geese. Their numbers have increased drastically in the last probably decade and a half, and they've actually destroyed habitat where they nest, and they're moving around on the tundra. So the growing season in tundra is very short. Once you destroy that habitat, it takes a long time, probably generations, to grow that back. And so the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, the Canadian Wildlife Service, and all the flyways really want to reduce the population of light geese as much as we can, and hunting is a tool that we can use. So they establish these conservation seasons, and there are 2 ways you can partake of a conservation season. One is the easy way, which Tennessee has used for a number of years, where you don't have to report anything, any activity or any harvest, but you don't get all the provisions. And so with these increased calls that we've been receiving the last couple of years, and an increased interest in hunters chasing snow geese because of the increase in numbers in our state, we decided to recommend to you today an increase in the provisions that we allow during the season. Now that will require hunters obtaining a free permit. We're working with our IT staff, and I want to thank Michael and his staff for working with us, and as well as law enforcement. It'll require a free permit. We're working on the details of that, but essentially it'll be go to the website, fill in your name and a little bit of information, and you'll self-print your permit. So we want to make it as easy as possible for folks to get this permit. The reason that we need the permit is that we've got to report back to the Fish and Wildlife Service the effort in the harvest during those days. So we need a way to contact these hunters at the end of the year. So I'll go through now the asterisk at the bottom, the additional provisions that we're going to allow should you folks pass this recommendation or this proclamation. I'll just read it so that it's clear. A free light goose conservation season permit is now required to hunt during the conservation season. Hunting is allowed from 30 minutes before official sunrise to 30 minutes after official sunset. There's no daily bag or possession limit. No federal or state waterfowl stamps are required to hunt during the conservation season, but a hunter must possess a light goose conservation season permit and have a valid hunting license, but the license may be from any state. So I'd be glad to answer any questions if you have them. Just do want to say the provisions and how we're handling this permit is almost identical to what Arkansas does. They're kind of at ground zero for snow geese. They've been shooting geese there for a long time. And so law enforcement and the Wildlife Division have gone through this process and really looked at what Arkansas did. And we think this will be a great way for our hunters to have additional opportunity and also be able to take some additional provisions that we don't currently have. Okay, that was probably the most complex part of the meeting today.
I just want to make sure that everyone on the commission understood that. You do not have to have a waterfowl stamp, federal or state,
Correct.
and any license in the country, you can come to Tennessee and,
That's correct.
Okay.
If it's valid. So you could buy a one-day small game hunting license from, California, and if you're here when that's valid, you can hunt.
I hope we do a good job of publicizing that and making sure the public knows, because that might be a good means to encourage people to dip into waterfowl hunting and maybe the next year actually buy a license and
Right.
get involved. Thank you.
Okay, the Canada goose season is the next here in the proclamation.
I got a question about that. What is the agency's policy going to be if someone does not have that free permit, and their wildlife officer checks them?
I will defer to the colonel.
Yeah, Commissioner Cox, our general policy will be that if it's new, the first year is a warning situation. Does that make sense?
If data collection is, and it's free, I mean, there's, our effort should be just to, notify them. I don't know the first year, second year, whatever, but I hate for somebody to get a citation because they don't have a new free.
We'll give direction to warn them.
Okay, any further questions on that? Okay. There's a map at the bottom here. Again, I want to just mention that we have 2 Canada goose zones in Tennessee. The Northwest Goose Zone, which is bigger than the Reelfoot Duck Zone, it's parts of 5 counties there, and then we have the statewide, which is a majority of the state. So if we look at the statewide goose zone, cell here in this table, we've got essentially it mirrors duck season, and so we've got November 28th and 29th, and then it opens December 5th through January 31st, and we've got a few extra days that we're allowed to hunt, and so we put them in October. That's the traditional place that they go. And the Northwest Canada Goose Zone is nearly identical to the Reelfoot Zone, November 14th and 15th, and then December 5th through the 13th. And again, we put those extra days up in October. Sandhill Cranes, the Sandhill Crane season, this will be our 3rd year of the experimental 3-year season. There are no changes recommended, but the dates this year that we're proposing, again, they're supposed to mirror duck season, November 28th and 29th, and then December 5th, and we close on January 1st, 2016. So that concludes the information in Proclamation 1520 that's in front of you. Tennessee Wildlife Resources Agency recommends adoption of Proclamation 1520 with the season dates and bag limits as outlined in this presentation.
Thank you, Joe, for being so organized and presenting us a lot of information in a short